Speaker.
I call Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Energy Innovation, Electric Vehicles and Other Matters Amendment Bill is the government's attempt to make it look as if it is doing something significant about addressing carbon emissions in this country. But of course, the New Zealand public are not fooled by that. Doesn't matter how many times Simon Bridges goes and has a photo op with with an electric vehicle. No one's going to be impressed by his tiny target of having just 2% of the vehicle fleet being electric by 2021. That is his target. His colleagues don't even realise how tiny his target is. He only wants to have 2% of the vehicle fleet being electric vehicles. It's not 100% wrong. 2% by 2021. That's what his tiny target is. He's 64,000 vehicles. That, Mr Hudson, represents 2% of the entire fleet by 2021. So it's underwhelming. And of course, in order to bring across about this underwhelming target by 2021, it's underpinned by this underwhelming piece of legislation. And it is a tiny target because I recall back in 2008 when I was debating, and I'm still debating actually, in Hamilton, the idea of getting a commuter train service between Hamilton and Auckland. That's right, diesel. Diesel because it's better than 200 petrol cars on the road. Much better for the environment than that. David Bennett can't do that maths, but it is. Okay, so when we're debating this, David Bennett says in 2008, well, he said that's a waste of time because in 10 years' time, everyone's going to be driving an electric car, he said. 10 years' time from 2008. Well, hang on, let me do the maths. That would be 2018. So David Bennett, National MP, said that by 2018, everyone would be driving an electric vehicle. How underwhelmed and disappointed must David Bennett be with his own Minister of Transport's announcement that not everyone would be driving an electric motor vehicle by 2018. Not only that, but that he only wanted 2% of drivers to be driving an electric vehicle by 2021. So I think the national government's outdone itself in being, they used to be, what did they used to say? That they used to be ambitious for New Zealand. I think they've completely given that away, and now just 2% will do. So here's the piece of legislation that's going to bring about that tiny target. I agree with Stuart Nash, because what all the evidence and research says is that the thing that's going to really drive the purchase and procurement by New Zealanders of electric vehicles is the purchase price coming down substantially. That's the one thing that will make it really attractive for New Zealanders to do better than 2% of the vehicle fleet being electric by 2021. So what's one of the things that the government could do? What's the best thing the government could do to bring the purchase price down of electric vehicles? The best thing the government could do is to ensure that all of the government vehicles, all of the government fleet, as they are replaced by an electric vehicle. Will they do that? No. They've said, oh, we'll think about it. Oh, we'll look at a procurement policy. But have they said, as a government, we will lead the way and we will ensure that as our large fleet of government vehicles gets replaced, they will be replaced with electric vehicles? No, they wouldn't even go that far. It's no wonder Simon Bridges will only commit to the tiny target of 2% by 2021. And as Stuart Nash said, 40% of the carbon emissions in this country come from the transport sector. So that tiny target, 2% of 40%, is barely going to make the difference that we need to make in terms of reducing carbon emissions in this country. So the one thing that the government could do that would make a difference, they have failed to do. But instead they're tinkering around the edges. Things that we know actually don't bring about a big cultural change. So in this bill, what they are doing is that they are going to allow electric vehicles into bus lanes. How clever is that, Mr. Speaker? Bus lanes set aside for public transport are now going to be cluttered up with cars. How is that going to help? How is that going to reduce carbon emissions? How is that going to ensure that New Zealanders go out and buy electric vehicles? Well, it's just not, because we know that it's the purchase price coming down that will allow New Zealanders to go out and buy those vehicles, not any of these silly rules that are actually designed to congest the bus lanes, because that's what's going to happen next. The bus lanes are going to get congested, and we know in Auckland that's a problem already. We know that those bus lanes are already congested with buses. They are full up with buses. Now this government wants to clog them up further with cars. They want cars to go and use the bus lanes. It's just nuts. Mr. Speaker, they also have gone down this route of reducing road user charges for the heavy electric vehicles. However, the regulatory impact statement tells us that that's already a failed policy. It's already a failed policy because the government's already put this in place for light electric vehicles. Road user charges, light electric vehicles are exempt from road user charges until 2020. Has that made a difference? Has that meant that people have rushed out and bought light electric vehicles? No, it hasn't. What makes the government think that this is the magic bullet that is going to address this for buses and trucks, when their own advice that they've had is that it doesn't make any difference? So what the regulatory impact statement says is that electric vehicles currently make up a small proportion of light and heavy vehicle fleet. It in fact only makes up 0.03% of light vehicle fleet as at the 31st of January this year. The number of heavy electric vehicles in New Zealand at the moment is 60 of them currently. However, what the regulatory impact statement points out is that even though the light electric vehicles have been exempt from road user charges already, that hasn't made a blind bit of difference in terms of the uptake of them. Because, and I'm going to say it again, we know that the thing that drives the uptake of electric vehicles is bringing the purchase price down, and sadly, neither of those two measures attempts to do that. So, but what it has done is it has reduced the cost of a road user charge of about $558 per vehicle. So it's meant that there's less money available in the National Land Transport Fund to actually fund transport projects, but it doesn't mean that there's been any discernible increased uptake in the purchase of light electric vehicles. It does, though, under the regulatory impact statement, it has robbed the National Land Transport Fund of around $500,000 per year already. So what we've got the government coming to the House proposing to do is to reduce the amount of money available for the National Land Transport Fund, which funds all of our transport policy, all of our infrastructure, but doesn't do anything to increase the number of electric vehicles that are purchased. The one thing that will work in that area is bringing the purchase price down. The one way in which the government can do that is to lead by example, is to use its huge purchasing power with the very large government fleet. So yes, I'm talking ministerial cars, but also all the cars used by our core government departments. This government could have and should have said that it would use its procurement to buy electric vehicles in order to build the fleet up for second-hand car sales of electric vehicles, and therefore bringing the purchase down. But it has failed to do that. It instead has set itself a tiny target and has brought this underwhelming bill forward to underpin that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.